Okay, bon matin, good morning, good to see everyone. I would just like to highlight three things, and then I'm happy to answer your questions. First, just on the Canadian economy, we have had some good news over the summer. Inflation has now been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 7 months in a row at 2.5% in July. That was a 40-month low. The Bank of Canada has now cut interest rates 3 times in a row, and the Bank of Canada was the first G7 country to cut interest rates the first time, the first G7 country to cut them a second time, and the first G7 country to cut them a third time. Wages have been outpacing inflation for 18 months in a row, and that is really good news for Canadian families. It means they bring home more in their paychecks. And the IMF is forecasting that Canada will have the strongest GDP growth in 2025. On a eu des nouvelles économiques bonnes pendant l'été. L'inflation est dans la fourchette cible du Banque du Canada pour 7 mois. Le Banque du Canada a diminué le taux directeur déjà 3 fois. Et le Fonds monétaire international prévoit que le Canada aura la croissance économique la plus forte dans tout le G7 dans 2025. Second thing I'd like to do is highlight some really important measures for students. We know that fairness for every generation is incredibly important. We know that investing in our young people is incredibly important. And as a parent, I'm very aware that this is the back-to-school season. So I'd just like to highlight that, as we said in our budget, we are making an investment in young Canadians, in Canadian students, of $7.3 billion this year. What is that allowing us to do? The Canada Student Grant is going up again this year from $3,000 to $4,200 a year. Canada student loans, which are interest-free, are going from $210 a week to $300 a week. In total, our investment in students, in young Canadian brains, is $7.3 billion this year. Alors, je voudrais souligner l'investissement qu'on fait dans la jeune génération, qu'on fait dans nos étudiants. On fait un investissement dans les étudiants canadiens de 7,3 milliards de dollars cette année, dans les prêts, dans le financement pour nos étudiants. C'est très important. And then finally, I have an announcement. As people saw, at the cabinet retreat, the Prime Minister announced that we will be imposing tariffs on EVs from China and on steel and aluminum from China. Today I'm announcing a 30-day consultation on imports to Canada from China of batteries, battery parts, semiconductors, critical minerals and metals, and solar products. Alors, pendant le retrait du cabinet, le Premier ministre a annoncé les tarifs du côté du Canada au acier, aluminium et véhicules électriques de la Chine. Aujourd'hui, on annonce une consultation de 30 jours concernant les importations de la Chine des batteries électriques, des éléments des batteries, des minéraux critiques, des semi-conducteurs et des produits solaires. Et maintenant, je suis prête à répondre à vos questions.
La présence de M. Carney, pensez-vous que la présence de M. Carney, est-ce que ça vient pas, là, il vient faire une présentation sur l'économie, est-ce que ça vient pas un peu discréditer votre travail pour attirer quelqu'un de l'extérieur pour venir acheter une stratégie économique? Est-ce que ça vient pas un peu discréditer votre autorité comme ministre des Finances?
Absolument pas. Absolument pas, non. Moi et Marc, nous sommes des amis de très longue durée, même des amis entre nos familles. Je respecte Mark énormément et je parle avec Mark souvent. Je pense que c'est vraiment une bonne chose pour la partie libérale et pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes qu'on aura des conseils du Mark concernant l'économie. Et je vais me répéter en anglais. Thank you for the question. I'm really glad to welcome Mark here to our cabinet retreat. He is a real addition to our team. Mark is a friend of a personal friend of very long standing. He's someone who I talk to often and whom I've talked to often about economic policy since becoming finance minister. I had a long conversation with him over the weekend. It's really great for our team to have Mark providing advice to the Liberal Party so that we can support Canada and Canadians. Well, in terms of Mark's policies, views, I think those are questions for Mark. I think you guys know my view on hypotheticals. As I learned during the NAFTA negotiations, it's never a good idea for a politician to answer hypotheticals. Je pense que ce qu'on doit faire en ce qui concerne l'économie, c'est livrer la marchandise. On doit livrer, livrer, livrer. On était à l'écoute pendant tout l'été. Et ce qu'on a entendu, c'est que les Canadiens ont besoin du logement. On doit construire plus de logements plus vite. Les Canadiens ont besoin d'une vie abordable. On doit travailler sur ça. Et les Canadiens ont besoin d'une croissance économique qui travaille pour tout le monde. So when it comes to the economy, what we heard over the summer, all of us spent a great deal of time traveling the country, talking to people in our own communities. We heard that people have frustrations, and we listened. And what we heard is that Canadians need housing. They need us to build more homes faster. That is what we're doing. Canadians need life to be more affordable. We are working so hard on that with programs like early learning and childcare, with programs like dental care, and the fact that inflation and interest rates are coming down is extremely helpful in that regard too. And then finally, what Canadians need that we are focused on delivering is economic growth that works for everyone. Look, it is important to be candid with Canadians, and it's been a summer when Canadians have been candid with us. And I think all of us have heard Canadians have a lot of frustrations. It is so important for us to hear the concerns of Canadians, to listen to those concerns, to act on them, and to deliver. And that is what we are all absolutely focused on doing, starting with the Prime Minister. I think I've already answered that question, but I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to answer again. So let me just say about Mark, truly, Mark is a personal friend of mine of very long standing. I have been talking to Mark about the economy since long before I became a politician. And as soon as I became a minister, I continued to talk to Mark and get his advice and talk about ideas with him. He is a highly respected Canadian economic leader. It is a really good thing for our party and for Canada and Canadians that we are now able to draw even more on Mark's advice. He and I had a really good conversation over the weekend, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with him. C'est une question pour lui. C'est une question pour lui. Okay, I need to go to caucus, but before I do want to comment on one other thing. There is a film that is due to be screened at TIFF today in Toronto about Russian soldiers at war. Ukrainian diplomats and the Ukrainian Canadian community have expressed really grave concerns about that film, and I do want to say I share those concerns. We have to be really clear that this is a war where there is no moral equivalency. This is a war of Russian aggression. This is a war where Russia is breaking international law and committing war crimes. There is very clearly good and evil in this war. Ukrainians are fighting for their sovereignty and for democracy around the world. And we as a country have to be very, very clear that there can be no moral equivalency in our understanding of this conflict. It's not right for Canadian public money to be supporting the screening and production of a film like this. Merci beaucoup.